Welcome to Global Kinship, Exploring the Evolving Noosphere, a monthly webinar series sponsored by Creation Spirituality Communities. My name is Gail Ransom. I join Bob Eisenberger and Penny Andrews in bringing you these monthly explorations on the emerging collective human consciousness foreseen by Pierre de Chardin 100 years ago. This is the noosphere. It is an expectation of human evolution into a sphere of shared intelligence that envelops the world. All of our advances in medicine and in physics, our technological advances, our agricultural innovation all point to the rising and of new abilities of the human mind. But there's also the social level. And if it's one thing the internet has taught us, amazing, is that we humans are very social creatures. Yoga classes, exchanges of spiritual practice, cooperative leadership, shared song circles, new ways of working together, our expanding population requiring different solutions. All this is also requires an intelligence different than the left brain intelligence. And that's what we are talking about today and moving forward. In fact, this cooperative leadership that we are that I brought up is what's being used in the leadership for the next gathering of the Creation Spirituality Communities on Cape Cod, which happens at the end of May, May 30th to June 2nd, where, as from my observation, the leadership is a shared cooperative leadership where everyone has a say and everyone takes part and everyone takes ownership. A much more pleasing situation than the top-down kind of leadership. So Penny is involved with the program and the rituals, and she's also what we call the theme weaver for the weekend. Penny, do you have anything to add?
Yes, it's being held at this wonderful old church camp near Barnstable, Massachusetts, and I've heard it's like going back in time a bit. And we have Michael Mansfield and Daniel Barber who do wonderful music and offerings as careers, and they're kind of the guides of the journey. And then there'll be a cosmic ritual on Saturday night. There's a lot of art to be made. And for me, the theme that I'll be bringing for the opening talk is this idea of islands of coherence. That when things become unstable, islands of coherence will come together, and then it stands a chance of becoming the next dominant way of being. So, so we hope to co-create through stargazing, through labyrinth walking, through art making, and listening to speakers Matthew Fox and Brian Swim via Zoom. This environment that will be out of time and out of place and coherent. So if you have any time available, I think it's going to be a charming opportunity. And you just go to creationspiritualitycommunities.org, cscommunities.org, and take a look for more information. Thanks, Gail.
Yeah, well, thank you, Penny. We've had fun talking about things and exploring this idea of the islands of coherence. And I think this group is also could be considered an island of coherence or moving towards coherence, the sharing ideas together, beginning to get a certain kind of understanding that's shared by many and that we take other places. But hopefully, I always think of the islands as floating rather than, you know, grounded to the bottom of the ocean. So I think of us all suddenly bumping up against another island who is sharing those thoughts, and then another island comes bumping up, and so this is one way we build that new sphere all the way around the Earth that is filled with good feelings and positivity, and so let's keep working. To address both the opportunities and the dangers of this moment in evolution, J.D. Stillwater emphasizes looking to the living systems that drive paradigm shifts and cultural awakenings. Creation spirituality, too, addresses these enormous issues with the paradigms and the processes of nature. The four paths parallel the life of a plant, the arc of our psychological and spiritual growth, or the sun seasons of the earth. So, when JD talks to us about the nature of reality, you might want to keep in mind that he is not only talking about the stars and the comets, he is also talking about the path your body takes to heal a wound. It's that close. So, welcome all to this island of coherence, and we will be enlightened together.
Great, thanks, Gail. For those of you who have been with us before, you know that our technical requests are simple. We ask that you mute yourself at all times until we get to time for Q&A. When it is time for questions for JD, I ask you to check your Zoom toolbar and the icon called Reactions. And under Reactions, you're going to find the words Raise Hand. And that'll put you in queue to ask questions in sequence. I think I'm hearing some noise in the background. I hope that person can mute themselves. And now Penny has a couple of words for us before we get started.
Uh, uh, my mute won't mute. I don't know if anybody else is having that trouble.
Okay. Well, okay. So be it. Penny, go ahead.
Okay. Before we start and aligned with our topic today, I'd like to acknowledge the birthday of one of our lineage in the creation spirituality family. And that is that today is Joanna Macy's 95th birthday. And she is still going strong, still sharing wisdom and bringing us the best she has to give, that she has been giving her whole life, around this idea of the way Earth has been challenged by human beings, and also what do we need to make it differently? What do we need to create a noosphere of healing for Earth? So I'd like to share this quote of hers, and it's very aligned with JD's presentation today. Just as lovers seek union, we are apt, when we fall in love with our world, to fall into oneness with it as well. We begin to see the world as belonging to us as intimately as our own bodies. So hold her in your hearts, that she's able to share her wisdom for every day that she walks our planet. Now it's a delight for our centering to coming to center before our presentation that we do a sharing, and Bob happened to stumble on this wonderful offering, and it comes about as JD's fingerprint is on this as well. It's a song by Peter Mayer and called Blue Boat Home, and JD created the videos for this offering. So let's begin by just settling into a wonderful piece of music that Gail has added, will be known to many of you because it's a church hymn as well.
No far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Drinking warm water before bed
Ah.
balances blood sugar levels and reverses type 2. Thousands of people are.
My apologies. Okay. What an uplifting song, enhanced by those great images. Thank you, JD. It's my real delight, deep delight, to introduce our speaker today. From university classrooms to the parliament of the world's religions, to academic conferences and civic clubs, JD Stillwater inspires thousands of people all over North America and around the globe to whatever worldview based upon sustainable systems that are aligned with how reality works. JD is a graduate of Cornell University, after which he embarked upon a 24-year career teaching science in secondary classrooms. JD now travels the world sharing science-centered messages of awe, deep kinship, and sustainability, bringing difficult science concepts within our reach. He is an officer of the Religious Naturalist Association, a global community of people who take nature to heart. He also serves on the governing council of the Institute on Religion in an age of science. In 1989, JD walked from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. in the Great Peace March for Global Nuclear Disarmament. The following year, JD was one of 200 Americans who joined 200 Soviets to walk from Leningrad to Moscow on the American-Soviet Walk, which ended with JD's band performing for 50,000 people, sharing the stage with Santana, James Taylor, and other American and Soviet bands. JD is married to his graciously supportive and patient spouse, Anne, since 1987. They have 2 children, both now grown and pursuing their own passions, programming/music and ministry. JD, welcome. I saw you come back in.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I'm here. We should probably let people know that we had some serious technical issues just before this whole thing started, and we're not actually certain that the screen sharing is going to work.
All right, well, we'll give it a shot here.
Here we go. Oh, it did it again.
Nope, that's good.
It's good? Oh, good. Wonderful. Okay. Now I am still getting some interference from somebody's audio. And I don't know, Bob, if maybe you can mute them as the host or something, but
I'm scanning.
it may be distracting others as well.
Yeah. I managed to mute Gail, who had a problem earlier. I'm not seeing anybody who is unmuted. Oh, wait, maybe.
Well, while you work on that, I'm going to forge ahead. Does that work?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, hi, I'm glad to be here, and thanks for inviting me. My spouse Ann and I are low budget travelers, and a few years back, we wanted to take our kids on a visit to, oh geez, now I'm having other problems. Here we go. Okay. We wanted to take our kids to visit Carlsbad Caverns as part of this cross-country adventure that we took as a family. Well, I said low budget. The only accommodations near the park were out of our price range by quite a bit. But we had heard that it's legal to camp anywhere on land that's owned by the Bureau of Land Management. And our AAA map showed this huge expanse of desert right across the highway marked BLM, which was perfect, right? So we drove out this rugged dirt track and we pitched our tent on the dusty hardpan. And we made and ate supper, but before going to bed, I realized that I needed to use the restroom. Number 2. Well, the closest restroom was over the horizon from where we were camping. Now, we are veteran campers, enough to know that here in Pennsylvania, and actually all these eastern woodlands, it's proper to bury one's bodily waste at least 6 inches deep. But in the high desert, proper disposal involves leaving it to just dry in the sun. And I knew that. So I strolled some distance away from our campsite before taking care of business. And also I was enjoying the crystal clear star field that was above me. Now, at this point, you may be thinking that this story involves a painful encounter with a cactus. But no, while there were plenty of prickly plants around, this story's magic begins the next morning. As we packed up in the bright morning sun, we saw something that you cannot see in the northeastern states, like here in Pennsylvania. At different times, 4 large beetles came through our camping area where we were eating breakfast, each one rolling a dusty little marble along the ground and following these surprisingly straight trajectories as they did so. And those tracks they were on exhibited a strange pattern. They seemed to radiate out from a single point, some ways off. Guess which point? Well, we were mystified, so we followed their paths in reverse, encountering dozens of similar beetles, all racing out in all directions from the now completely bare spot where I had squatted the night before. How did they find it? Where were they going? It was astounding and kind of unnerving, and it made a lasting impression on us and our kids. Well, I now know that dung beetles need those precious brown marbles to feed and nurture their own children. And often they only get one shot at it, if they get even one. Now, this happened long before I started thinking in earnest about science and spirituality, but it was an intimate and a visceral lesson in the ways I am connected to the world around me, especially the living world. I hate to disappoint, but this is not a talk about dung beetles. It is about the science of unity. And you might expect science to be a big party pooper when it comes to unity and oneness, the humbug know-it-all who ridicules all that kumbaya stuff in favor of cold, hard reality. Well, play along with me here and let's just see what science has to say about unity and reality. Let's start at the beginning of time. According to the best evidence science has to work with so far, the universe began as a singularity. What an interesting name, given my topic of unity today. Well, there's a reason it's called that. The singularity at the beginning of time contained the entire universe, but compacted, infinitely dense, so that all of it, the entire universe, had no volume, no size at all. Both of these definitions apply there at the beginning of time. The cosmos was indivisibly singular, and it was infinitely small and infinitely dense. The Reverend Carol Martignaccio calls it the everything seed, the seed that grew into everything. Nobody knows what happened before the beginning of time, but all the evidence we have now says that at the beginning of time, that tiny speck rapidly expanded or inflated, creating space and time as it did. Everything in the universe, from this talk today to interstellar dust in the most distant galaxies, it's all traceable back to that one single thing at the beginning of time. Now, I know this is old news for most global kinship people or anyone who knows of Brian Swimm's work, but it's important to review it, I think, in the context of unity, just to emphasize that the rest of that story is still about one single thing. That thing evolving through a process of diversifying. So, quick recap. At the beginning of time, there was only energy, no atoms, no matter, no mass, not even any space, no solids, liquids, or gases, nothing that we would call a thing, just pure energy. Now, matter and energy are like nouns and verbs. Matter is stuff, things, objects. Energy is movement, action, ability, potential. So how did the universe make all this stuff if all it had to work with in the beginning was energy? Well, by way of analogy, in the sentence, girls are running, everyone knows that girls can run, right? But they can't become running. Girls are, running happens. As a noun, she can do running, but she can't become running. And the verb running can't become a girl, right? This is all common sense. It feels silly to even say it. But stay with me now, because along comes this great mystic and prophet who showed us that the verbs of energy can become the nouns of matter. Running can become girls. We now know that at extreme energy densities, in other words, when it's hot enough, matter can condense out of extremely bright light. And in those first moments after time began, particles that would later form atoms of hydrogen and helium condensed out of nothing more substantial than very bright light. And this isn't somebody's fantasy or daydream. It's what physical evidence tells us happened. And to me personally, this is a revelation. And I use that word deliberately. Yeah, I know it's often associated with religion, but it's the right word, I think. So everything in the universe, everything that's an object, as well as all the things that are energies or events or that are still mysterious, like dark matter, they all have a common origin, a shared genesis in the energy of that Big Bang singularity. 55 years ago, in 1969, Joni Mitchell sang, "We are stardust. We are billion-year-old carbon." Well, as most of you know, it's literally true. So this is the part in this talk where I dive in to tell the story of nucleosynthesis. But I have a feeling this audience is familiar with that story, at least a little bit. So I'm going to skim through it kind of quickly. The early universe only had particles that would later cool enough to form atoms of hydrogen and helium. That's it, though. You can't make an apple pie from scratch if all you have in the pantry is hydrogen and helium. So where did all this other stuff come from? Well, there is one thing you can make from atoms of hydrogen and helium: stars. But stars didn't exist yet. The universe only had this kind of diffuse gas of those two elements all spread out. Over time, a long time, gravity gathered those atoms into the first generation of stars. And that was convenient for us because making heavier atoms from light ones requires really high temperatures, like those you find inside our sun, which, as you know, is a star. And that's what stars do. They smash atomic nuclei together at such high temperatures that instead of repelling each other like normal, they stick. What is he talking about? Well, here's a way to imagine this. Let's just say we fire two bouncy balls from cannons or guns or something so that they collide head on. That would be fun, I think. And at any speed I can imagine, of course, they're just going to bounce off each other. And so do the nuclei of atoms under normal circumstances. But imagine if you could fire those bouncy balls at such a high speed that the rubber of the balls would actually melt when they collided in the center. So they would end up melting and sticking together like one thing. That's a little bit like the nuclear fusion process that happens in stars, where temperatures, speeds, are high enough to smash ever larger nuclei together to turn simple light atoms like hydrogen and helium into heavier ones like carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. But normal stars can't make anything heavier than iron, any elements heavier than iron. And any atoms they do build are just going to sit inside the star forever. So none of this planet stuff came from normal stars. But there are some stars, supermassive stars, really big ones, that live fast and die young. They go out with a bang called a supernova explosion. And in the moments of that explosion, temperatures are so high, energy is so dense that all the other natural elements can be formed, even really heavy ones like lead and uranium. But then those fusion products get exploded out in the explosion, in the supernova, dispersed as precious hot dust. The gravity, here again, slowly collects together into new solar systems, but this time with planets around them. And on at least one of those planets, life happened and evolved into the living planet that we enjoy today. Now, I know that was a very fast trip through nearly 14 billion years of history, but my point is that the seeds of you and me were present there at the dawn of time. And we are descended from stars just like those we see in the night sky. Stars are in our family. We're not only connected to those events in the early universe, we are those events, still occurring, still unfolding, to use Brian Swim's words. We're still one thing. With all our diversity, with all the different galaxies, stars, planets, living things, there's only one event here. A few years after that fateful camping trip with the dung beetles, I was teaching high school physics. And I noticed something about gravity. Now, this is high school, right? So it's Newton's law of universal gravitation, which you can use to calculate the force of gravitational attraction between any two objects. You know, if algebra is not your forte, just close your eyes for a minute. Also, Einstein did change how we conceive of gravity, but Newton's equation still works for most things. And it reveals that gravity is not just something planets do like we normally think. There is a force of gravitational attraction between any two objects with mass. And you can calculate it if you know their masses and the distance between them. It's weak. Gravity is actually the weakest force in the universe. So you need something the size of a planet to really feel it, to experience it. Anyhow, I always made up my own homework problems because I wanted students to personalize the material. So I would make questions like, what is the gravitational attraction between your body and that other student you have a crush on sitting 5 meters away across the classroom? Or another question, what if that person is standing on Pluto? So, you know, I'd give them the masses and the distances and they'd calculate the force of gravity. It was fun. Well, at some point while composing these homework problems, it dawned on me that the answer will never be 0. It can be really, really small. In fact, it almost always is. But no matter how small the objects are or how far apart they are, there is always some small force of attraction, gravitational attraction between them. And this hit me like a religious revelation. There are invisible threads of gravitational connection radiating out from my body, connecting me gravitationally with everything in the universe, from people in Zimbabwe to asteroids orbiting stars and distant galaxies. Uncountable threads of connection that shift and flex every time I move. The mass in my body, I realized, helps hold the galaxy together. I felt like I had stumbled on a profound revelation. Another such revelation came when I taught biology and earth science in the same semester. You may remember that photosynthesis allows plants to make themselves, to build their bodies out of carbon dioxide and water, storing the energy of sunlight in the chemical bonds of sugar molecules. Well, in turn, we make ourselves out of plants, either directly or indirectly. So ultimately, our bodies are also made of CO2 and water. So I want to take a closer look at those ingredients. Here's a diagram of the water cycle, and you know this, right? Water evaporates from the ocean, it drifts over the land, and then rains or snows back down, and then runs downhill one way or another back to the sea. But there's something missing here, and it's missing from almost all the water cycle diagrams I've ever seen. One of the things some of the water does as it goes around the cycle is be you. Water molecules are so small and so numerous, and they cycle around the earth so constantly that every cup of beverage you swallow contains at least 150 million water molecules that passed through Jesus's body during his lifetime. Talk about holy water. That same cup of water contains even more water molecules that passed through Buddha's body just because he lived longer. Sorry, I got one slide ahead. So yeah, every cup of water, which means juice, soda, coffee, every cup contains water molecules that were once part of every creature that ever lived more than a few decades ago. So we drink this holy water, and it comes alive inside us as part of the living system of our bodies. Water comes alive when we drink it. The carbon cycle is similar, except that as carbon goes around its cycle, it spends time as seashells, coal and petroleum, limestone, concrete, all these different carbonate compounds as well. Also, some of it as living processes like our bodies. Some of the carbon atoms posing as you right now were gasoline in your car last winter. Something similar is true of the nitrogen cycle and the oxygen cycle, the saline cycle, all these earthly cycles of the atoms and molecules that make up our bodies. You ever wondered what it would be like to be an atom going around those cycles? I have, and that pondering came out as a poem called An Atom's Life. And I want to read you an excerpt from it. If carbon could choose, would it be a diamond or a daughter? There are entire planets of solid diamond. They do not smell like macaroni or squeal with laughter, swinging between strong hands, strolling through gentle breezes. They do not cuddle under downy quilts for communion, cannot dance under hot, pregnant skies, their breath and sweat mingling into iron-rich ancestral soils. Yes, if iron could choose, there would be no asteroids. They would fall in swarms, rusty storms of shooting stars, each atom straining with aspiration to become blood-red hemoglobin, light-sensing retinol, muscular myoglobin of living motion, each coveting a chance to live, to bleed, to see the stars, and to reach for them in person. So we are part of these interconnected natural cycles the kids study in science class. And, we study them and teach them like they're out there somewhere, but they're also right here. We are in them and they are in us. Did you know every year 98% of the atoms in your body get exchanged for new ones? 98%. The human body is like a standing wave on a river. Matter moves through us and then moves on to become something else afterwards. Our bodies aren't really things. They're flows, or maybe more accurately, our bodies are complex patterns in the flow. And the flow is completely interconnected with the earth as a whole, because the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the lithosphere, these are all interconnected systems. We are Earth. Some days I feel like I must have been abandoned here by aliens. But, even if I were, within a year or so, my body would be entirely made up of the water, air, and minerals of Earth. I am Earth. We are Earth. It's not just inanimate matter that cycles through us. Other living things flow through us too and become us temporarily as they do so. And mostly I'm talking about bacteria here, although fungi, viruses, and insects flow through us too. On and inside our bodies, bacterial cells outnumber the human cells. There are thousands of species, trillions of bacterial cells, all cooperating and competing with each other and with us, with our human cells, all the time. They digest our food. They protect our inner and outer linings. And just in the last few decades, microbiologists have found that the species living on and in us influence when we're hungry and thirsty, our food preferences, our weight, even our emotions. So is it me who loves cheesecake or we? And the human cells in our bodies each contain dozens of mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. You may remember the mitochondria turn sugars into energy just so we can do things. This is the opposite of photosynthesis. Mitochondria break sugars back down into CO2 and water, and the energy from sunlight comes back out, available to keep us warm or move our muscles, whatever we need energy for. Do you see how this connects with both the water cycle and the carbon cycle? Well, we now know that these mitochondria are actually the descendants of ancient bacteria, still operating cooperatively inside our much larger human cells. And mitochondria have their own DNA, separate from the human DNA in your chromosomes. You got all your mitochondria from your mother, who got them from her mother, and so on, matrilineally. It comes with the egg. The ones in the sperm don't pass through. And paleogeneticists have been able to use the well-known, well-established mutation rate of mitochondrial DNA to determine that every human being alive today is a descendant of one woman who lived in Eastern Africa about 200,000 years ago. And this is National Geographic's map of how we migrated to every other continent since then. Similarly, if you have a Y chromosome, you got it from your father. And like all chromosomes, the Y chromosome accumulates small mutations that then get passed on from generation to generation. And we can trace those small differences back through families to find common ancestors, to establish relationships and see how they converge. And they do converge back in time on an unknown man called Y chromosomal Adam, who was the great-great-great-grandfather of everyone on the planet, at least everyone who has a Y chromosome. No surprise, migration maps from mitochondrial DNA and those from the Y chromosome match up pretty well with each other and with anthropological evidence. So, but I need to emphasize here that Mito Eve and Y Adam were not a couple. Don't let the names Adam and Eve fool you into thinking biblically about this. They almost certainly lived thousands of years and hundreds of miles apart from each other. They 100% certainly were Black, African people in Africa. They had parents and siblings and cousins. They are just the most recent ancestors whose mitochondria and Y chromosomes are still around, present in the bodies of everyone alive today. But consider the implications. This means every human being alive today, regardless of race or gender, ethnicity, they all have the same great, and a lot of greats grandparents that you do. So think about the people you work with and the ones at the ballpark and people on the other side of the planet. These are your cousins. There's only one family of people on this planet. Similar genetic analysis and lots of other evidence from many angles of inquiry tells us that every living thing on the planet is a blood relative, even the ones that have nothing like blood. We share half our genes with bananas, for Pete's sake. Bananas are your cousins too. All living things are related. We're part of a single unbroken family tree stretching back nearly 4 billion years. Environmental researcher Dr. Daniel Wildcat says, we live among relatives, not resources. We live among relatives, not resources. You may have heard of the butterfly effect, which came out of complexity theory, especially as it applies to weather forecasting. And the idea is that complex systems like the weather have so many factors involved that they become highly sensitive to small changes that accumulate over time, like a snowball effect. So for one example, a change as small as a butterfly flapping its wings in Washington can make enough of a difference to cause a typhoon in Tokyo a month later. That means every time you breathe, you change the state of the atmosphere enough to totally rearrange the weather a month or two from now, because every air molecule bumps into the ones around it, causing them to move and so on. But then the atmosphere is thermodynamically connected to everything: stock prices, war outcomes, the biosphere, the hydrosphere, even mountains, glaciers, everything on the earth is interconnected. So everything affects everything else sooner or later. And that butterfly effect sensitivity is built into many complex systems, and all those systems are connected with each other. I mentioned gravity earlier. No more equations, I promise. But I want to tell you that the orbits of planets, which are governed by gravity, have this same kind of complexity because they all experience gravitational pulls from one another and from the sun, as well as smaller objects that are, in effect, analogous to butterfly wings gravitationally. And all of them are in constant motion. So it's really hard to calculate these orbits precisely. And researchers at NASA who do this, who model those orbits, told National Geographic that a change as small as moving a pencil across a desk on Earth is enough to shift Jupiter halfway around its orbit a billion years later. Now, it's a small change in a very long time, but it's still significant. And your body is about 10,000 times the mass of a pencil. So those invisible threads of gravitational connection aren't just some fanciful idea. They have gravitas. There are many more examples of our connection and unity from science, but the bottom line here is we cannot separate ourselves from the cosmos, or more immediately, from the Earth. We are the Earth. The Earth is giving this talk, and the Earth is sitting in those earthen chairs listening. We and it are us, one thing. Our attempts to separate ourselves from the Earth, to other it, and to commodify its parts are like me trying to sell my liver or my heart to buy a bigger house in a nicer neighborhood. It's not going to work. Earth's whole and healthy systems are essential to my being. So there's only one story, 14 billion years long, and the characters in the story are completely interconnected on every level of existence. But what about the setting? What about space and time? Well, a century ago, that same great mystic and spiritual teacher showed us that space and time are actually unitive. They appear different to us, but they're actually a single expression of reality, space-time. But now, a century later, one of the hot topics in particle physics is non-locality. So we think of space-time as having a framework or a kind of a fabric. Even if it bends and curves, there's predictability to it. Things can be located, and two different locations are different, right? There's space between them, and that space is real. The separation is real, we think. Well, quantum entanglement calls all of that into question, and evidence is piling up that space-time may be non-local, meaning that maybe location has no meaning. I'm not going to try to explain quantum entanglement in this talk. You're welcome. Except to say that two particles that are entangled seem to communicate with one another over long distances instantaneously, faster than the speed of light. Another way to think of that is that entangled particles become a single object that can be in two places at the same time. And this picture is just for fun. But next is a figure from a paper published in 2015 in the journal Physical Review Letters with the title, How Space-Time is Built by Quantum Entanglement. Entanglement giving rise to space-time rather than happening in space-time. That same year, science writer George Musser was published in Scientific American, writing, and I'm quoting here, multiple branches of physics now suggest that at a deeper level, there may be no such thing as place and no such thing as distance, end quote. So non-locality suggests that there's only one place here, one location, even after billions of years of cosmic expansion and diversification, as though we are still in a singularity, but somehow diversified. What science says about unity and oneness is that your life story and my life story and those of dung beetles and germs and worms and rocks and flocks of geese and the moons and the Pleiades and distant galaxies' life story are all the same story, because there's only one story, one song, and there's only one character in the story. We, us, the universe. And I say this not as a prophet or a mystic, but as a hardcore, show me the evidence ambassador for mainstream science. Wouldn't it be cool if there were an actual song that told our entire story? It would have to be a ballad, a really long one. And I guess in some poetic way, the universe is a song. My understanding is that Australian Aboriginal peoples say the universe was sung into existence. And for Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, and Jains, the sound of the divine is Om. And that sound, they say, is synonymous with the cosmos, a singular divine cosmos brought into existence by a singular sound. Well, 750 years ago, the Islamic mystic and poet Rumi wrote, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." And more recently, Alan Watts put it this way. He said, "You didn't come into this world, you came out of it, like a wave from the ocean." So what do we do with this knowledge? If you think of natural reality as a kind of scripture, how should we interpret this deep interconnectedness? What does it mean for our lives? Well, coming from science means these revelations bridge cultural and religious boundaries, and that's important. And if you want to know more about that, you can watch my previous Global Kinship appearance. But the question remains, what should I do with this knowledge? Well, I can start with awareness. When I drink, I can think about how this cup of coffee or juice or whatever contains molecular emissaries from every ocean and from my ancestors, from every creature that ever lived. When I look up at the night sky, I can see ancient ancestors and life givers twinkling there, and I can give thanks, feel some gratitude about it. When I see a dung beetle cleaning up a mess, I can say, "Hey there, cousin, congratulations on finding a great nursery, and thanks for your work." As I walk in the woods, I can see relatives rather than resources. I can greet new people like long-lost cousins I'm meeting for the first time, because they are. Speaking of relatives and resources, the exact spot where we camped all those years ago now looks like this. Anyone know what those are? Here, I'll zoom in. Yeah, those are well pads for fracking. That whole area is now industrialized. Once aware of this knowledge, I can accept that everything I do affects everything else, no exceptions. I can sit with that for a while, letting both the power and the responsibility of it settle in my heart and my mind. I can affirm, I matter. As long as I'm alive, all those interconnected threads run through me too. Something I'm practicing is to use me less and we more. We the people, yeah, but also we Earth, we the universe, we reality. Like that old bumper sticker, think globally, act locally. I try to think of myself as an expression of the universe, a tiny cell in the body of someone vast, ancient, and dependent on me like I'm dependent on each of my own cells. I especially try to remember this when I'm dealing with people who take advantage of me or people with extreme ideologies. We need those people in order to be us, just like a forest community needs both poisonous mushrooms and beautiful flowers to be a forest. This doesn't mean I shouldn't be politically active or maintain good boundaries. But you know, my blood cells and bone cells are completely different from one another, performing nearly opposite roles in the ecosystem of my body. But I'd be a mess if my blood cells convinced all my bone cells to become just like them. Just as there are feedback systems among the cells in my body, I need to communicate my truth loudly and firmly in the body politic to other people in the body of humanity. And I can do that with grace and compassion and respect because I know those people are part of me, part of we, part of a still evolving singularity of everything. The philosopher Will Durant said something similar while he was explaining an aspect of the philosophy of Giovanni Bruno. He wrote, quote, "Behind the bewildering, fascinating variety of nature is the yet more marvelous unity, wherein all parts appear as organs of one organism. It is unity that enchants me, he wrote. By her power, I am free, though in chains, happy in sorrow, rich in poverty, alive even in death. Though I suffer, I find solace in recognizing that the evil of the part becomes meaningless in the perspective of the whole. Though I die, the death of the part becomes the rejuvenating life of the whole. Hence, the knowledge of the supreme unity is the goal of science and philosophy and the healing medicine of the mind. End quote. Another thing we can do with this knowledge is just share it. When we understand that we are unified at a fundamental existential level, it kind of puts our superficial divisions into perspective, right? When people begin spewing the same old arguments, the same old self-righteousness, I try to remember the deeper, more permanent truth of our unity. And I try to seek a higher vantage from which to see those commonalities and to make my way towards them. Jane Goodall said, "You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make." Cosmic unity isn't new. It's a thread that runs through every religious tradition in one way or another. What's new is empirical, physical, scientific confirmation of it, confirmation that transcends accidents of birth like nation, language, and culture. Here's how Dr. Martin Luther King expressed it in his letter from a Birmingham jail. He wrote, quote, "In a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. This is the interrelated structure of reality." End quote. The seventh generation of the grandchildren are part of the interconnected web too. What can I do for them today? How will they know that I love them? How can I sing to them across this web of unity that unites all space and time into a single song? This moment in this talk is that song still being sung, and each of us sings a unique and essential part of that greater whole. We, us, the universe. What else can I do but resolve to treat everyone and everything I encounter as an essential expression of my largest self? Because it is. I'm really grateful that you all tuned in today, and I'm grateful to Penny, Gail, and Bob for inviting me back. This is really fun for me, and I'm really glad that the tech seemed to be working, at least from my end, and I hope we still have time for some dialogue. So again, thanks.
We absolutely do have time. Thank you, JD. It's fascinating, and the crafting of the story that makes it so accessible. That is just a real treat to take in. So if you want to stop sharing your screen, and we can put everybody into gallery mode for the moment. And
there it goes.
There we go.
I'm going to move my camera around a little bit. I can see everybody a little better.
Yeah, you're so wired up there.
I am maybe overly wired up.
No, that's great. So Suzanne has remembered our procedure here. A reminder for everybody else, if you have a question for JD, go to your Zoom toolbar, and under the reactions button, you'll find the words raise hand, and that'll put you in line in sequence. So go ahead, Suzanne. I'm going to put you guys up on the screen together. And oh, it's already got it. Okay. Go ahead with your question,
Okay.
Suzanne.
Well, I've been a Brian Swim aficionado for decades now. And so it was lovely to hear you tell that story with a kind of different emphasis, same story. And to me, you know, the most important thing that could happen to humanity would be to learn this story. We need a new creation story. And we have one, and we just haven't adopted it yet. But then, you know, as I was listening to you, I kept thinking, of course, of course, of course. So why don't we all get it? You know, but we get it. I'm presuming everybody on this call gets this. But there's another world out there. And so what about that? And I'm thinking the underlying thing that keeps us separate is money, privilege, that there's so many people in survival, what have they're looking for eating, not for thinking, you know, and that's very challenging because that's something governments have to do for us. We can't handle that. I do a lot of thinking about what can we, the people, do that can make a difference in ways that most people aren't even thinking about that. But we have the internet and we haven't organized ourselves well yet. But it's not, but even then, what about this world that is just kind of not set up to adopt this? And I don't have an answer for that, but I think that is the main impediment to getting this story understood is how much of the world is in survival.
I don't have an answer for it either, but I think you hit it on the head when you said this, the systems we live in currently are not set up for that kind of change. And I suspect that they will have to break down at least some before we will make the changes that are necessary. And whether this story will survive that transition or not remains to be seen. But obviously, Joanna Macy and until last year, Michael Dowd, you know, lots of people are working really hard to try and make that transition survivable. But yeah, I agree with everything you said.
Right. Thanks, Suzanne. And Barbara, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi there.
I should have mentioned Meg Wheatley too. She's also doing this work.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Oh, hi there. First of all, thank you. What an honor to have listened to you this past hour. I am not totally new to this organization, but your work and your words were both poetic, I mean, just everything, and you probably know that.
Thank you,
but I
Barbara.
do agree with what the previous caller said. And, you know, on one hand, I feel this elation that, yes, I do think there's a lot of things going on that are encouraging in different spots through the world, and it will definitely come from the bottom up. And I think this presentation really should be in the schools' curriculums, but you know, I don't know where you are on getting your curriculum in schools and things like that, because I think that's where it starts. And as an outdoor educator, these are the stories I tell children, and I do see it happening, but it's not coming from the top down.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of interested if you have other resources or where your work is available to be in a school system or in a class.
I have until 2 years ago, I was full-time working in a school myself.
Well, I love that you were a teacher. I can't wait to like share this with my son, who is also a math mind kind of science guy, spirit. Yeah, it's like, wow, you speak the language.
Well, thank
and
you
you were
for
able to
doing that.
teach. And you were able to teach. Was it in a public school?
I taught in public schools for about 6 years, and then in a democratic school for about 18 years.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, it was very interesting. I have offered talks like this one, but eliminating more language like spiritual and religious and that kind of stuff.
Interesting. Uh-huh.
And some of the feedback I've gotten is that teachers today are they're trying to cram so much curricular material in before the state tests that there isn't much time except maybe after the tests are administered sometime in April or May.
I know, it's very sad what's happened in the public school system. Any other situations in private schools where they have more flexibility?
Yes, and we're still sort of ramping up that. My spouse and I are planning some tours, and we will be
Very
reaching.
cool. Have you, you probably know about the Global Oneness program?
It sounds familiar, but
It's out of Seattle, Washington, and they've been doing something with curriculum, and it's like, sounds like you, but just a little bit not as spiritual, but maybe so.
so I should
And
connect
then,
with them.
yeah, Global Oneness, really good source. And then my other question is, are you familiar with Service Space?
No.
Okay, that's another organization. I would love for them to have you do a seminar because they are a global organization that believes in the gift economy, and they've been doing a lot of cool stuff.
Service faith.
No, Service Space. Service Space, just service, the word Service Space. And it's a national organization, and it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And I just could see you, you know, and others like you do programs for them, but they're global, and they, you know, it's based on the gift economy. So you have to be in a situation where you can do that once or something, but I feel like they're reaching a lot of people, and they would love, I mean, if they don't already know about you, I'm surprised.
Well, if you have connections there, or if you're just.
Yes, I do.
Please send them my website. And
I will. And
great.
again, thank you for this. I don't want to take up too much time. Thank you.
You're welcome, Barbara. Thanks for
Thank
being.
you.
Okay, take
Thanks
care.
so much,
Bye.
Barbara. Great resources. I'm gonna look at those
Yeah.
myself.
Oh,
Thanks.
good.
John Fair, go ahead.
Yes, thank you.
John?
Thank you, JD. It was a beautiful story. I'm schooled as a scientist and an engineer, but I never really practiced it very much. But I really love the way that you unpack that story in the way that you did with the elements. And I'm familiar with Brian Swim's story, which is a beautiful story, but yours was a different take that I really liked. And what I really got out of the whole topic was at the end there. I think when you put the slide up, might have been near the end, where it said, "How will the future generations know that you loved them?"
I don't know if you noticed, I joked up when I was.
Oh,
saying
wow.
that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I work in masculine spirituality with men, and we do a lot of prompt questions like that. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, what a prompt question to open people up to where all of a sudden now they're ready to hear that story. You just can't all of a sudden sit down with a cup of coffee and launch off on a story. But if you could just sit down at a table with a bunch of strangers and say, "Hey, I've got a question for you guys and gals. How will the future generations know that you love them?"
Yeah. Well, if you do that, and please do, also please tell them that the person who said that is a friend of mine. We were camp counselors together. His name is Victor Anthony Lopez Carmen. He grew up on the Yaqui Reservation. He's a Yaqui Native American.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were counselors together, I think he was 18 or 19 years old, and he was laser focused on becoming a medical doctor so that he could go back and serve the people on his reservation who don't have medical care. They've been so much has been taken from them that the nearest doctor is, an hour or more away. And so he made it his life mission to provide that service. And he just finished medical school. He's entering his residency this fall. And it's been a long and difficult trip for him, partly due to prejudice.
Yeah.
So that's who said that.
That's
and,
a good thank.
And in a way, I think he's representing indigenous cultures all around the world
Right.
when he says that, because they had that seventh generation focus built into their worldview. Probably not all indigenous cultures, but it's a common thread among indigenous cultures. And we need that. We need to think that way.
Yeah.
So
Well, thank you for your spirit and your energy and for your courage. I'm out.
welcome. Glad to be here.
Thanks, John. Just to if I could just make a comment about your last observation there. a great image. I had the huge opportunity.
All right, you can move
To,
it.
somebody's
Turn it off if you want.
Barbara. Could you mute yourself, please?
It might be Carolyn.
Okay, I saw Barbara was unmuted too. Two indigenous perspectives that I picked up when I was working on my master's degree in environmental studies after my prior occupation left me. And one of them was, I was involved with a nonprofit that worked on water. And one of the phrases that came to us, I thought was a really real gift, was that settlers, as we're often referred to, tend to, in our educational perspectives, learn about water, whereas the indigenous perspective learns from water. And I thought that was so synchronous with the way you put things in your presentation, and it comes back to me periodically because it had such an impact on me. We have so much focus on formal education systems that, as Barbara was referring to, and Suzanne as well, I know, and many others I'm sure on the call, use an approach that's not so substantive, not so helpful. And the other was similar to the story about how will the seventh generation know that we love them. Is when I think of European perspective, we talk about a family tree or looking back in our background in the history before us, whereas the indigenous think of those who went before and those who paved the way and taught us and the ways of the world. And I thought both of those were great inversions of the European mindset.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't see another hand. We got somebody patiently waiting, and Penny would like to add something. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, JD. Wow, this was fabulous. The question I have been wanting to hear is your report from the eclipse this year. I had a chance at the Parliament to hear your last experience with the one previously. How did it go this year?
Oh, it is so hard to even describe. Wait, I'm going to see if I can go back to gallery view. Raise your hand if you saw a total eclipse ever in your life in the zone of totality. 1, 2, 3, 4. Awesome. And my spouse is here. It's hard to describe. It's unnerving because it challenges our worldview. You know, the sun comes up and it crosses the sky every day. It just does. We count on that, and then one day it comes up and disappears for a while, and everything goes dark. As I said in my talks before the eclipse, in which I was encouraging people to do what it takes to go to the zone of totality. And I forgot what I was going to say. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It undermines the way we think about the world. And there's so much symbology involved in the moon and the sun, both. I mean, they tap into deep archetypes for us, and they have physical influences on us. Like, you know, the moon affects the tides, and an eclipse is just such a rare thing, and hard to describe. It's joyful, and I think at the core of it, like so many other natural phenomena that feel spiritual when you experience them, it's awe. Just seeing the sun get blocked, even for a few minutes, invokes so much awe in us that it changes. Well, I don't want to. There's a whole tangent I can go off on about recent research on the science of awe, but it changes our body chemistry. It changes the way we think. People who experience awe are more generous. They feel more connected with the people around them. they feel small, but also connected. So there's humility and interconnection that sort of happens in our brains all at once. If you really want my take on what it's like to experience a total eclipse, go to my YouTube channel. It's JD Stillwater's professional channel, and there's some great talks there about the eclipse. Part of it is getting to the right spot, but I've gone off on too many tangents already. Have I answered your question, Penny? Not really. You have to go and see it yourself. But
Well,
actually, I want
it
to
does
ask
raise
you.
a question.
Go ahead.
Who would you point us to who's studying the science of awe, or where's the place to look?
Somebody that's been in the news a lot is Dacher Keltner. I'm going to put his name in the chat if I can figure out where the chat went. Oh, I see.
I put it in the chat.
Okay.
Great.
His name.
Great.
His book is great. He's out of Berkeley.
Yep, you got it. Okay.
Thanks, Barbara.
Yeah, he's fabulous. Another good one.
But I did a study of this when I wrote the first manuscript of my book, and some other last names that come to mind are Shiota, and that's Shiota. Yeah, now I'm drawing a blank. I had a list of them, but if you start with Dacher Keltner, that'll open up lots of doors.
Well, related, is your book coming out?
I hope so. It's been through one round of freelance editing. I hired a freelance editor, and she loved the book. She says she's had a lot of nice things to say about my writing, but now I have to go through it and make all the revisions that she recommended, and it's just taking a lot of time. So I need to make some revisions, and then I need to shop it out to publishers, and I don't know. There's no release date or anything like that. I don't even have a publisher at this point, but I'm feeling really optimistic about it. I think it's going to be good. And I wish I had a date, but if you subscribe to my newsletter, which you can do from my website, you will know for sure when it's coming out.
Excellent. I'm going to look forward to that myself for sure. We have another hand raised. Charles Jansen. I don't know if you can turn your video on or prefer not, but if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
I was just interested particularly in how this recording could be shared with other people. It was profound. I thank you so much for this bringing together of science and spirituality in the way that my mother would have appreciated. A nurse who taught biology also at university and who had this deep faith in the unity of nature. Thank you so much, really.
You're welcome, and thanks for the kind words. And at some point in the next days or weeks, Bob is going to post this on the YouTube channel for Global Kinship. Grab that link and share it.
Okay, all right, I'll look for that. And thank you so much.
Absolutely, and thanks for that comment, JD. Yes, the newsletters, the invitations that go out, that Gail puts out every month, include a button to go straight to the playlist where all of our Global Kinship videos are maintained. It's a playlist on the Creation Spirituality Communities YouTube channel, and we update that every month. So it takes me, anywhere from 6 to 24 hours to get the video up, and then you can go find it there. All right, and we have another question. Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hello. Thank you. This is wonderful. I've always, I sometimes think that I'm getting back to God through science rather than the other way around. And but it's interesting to me because I think his first name is Charles Eisenstein, is one of the things he talks about is the fact that our singular problem right now in our social systems is separation.
Yeah.
If you think about it, even something like a family unit has gone from multi-generational to nuclear family just in my lifetime.
Yeah. And we can go back.
Yeah,
We have to
yeah,
put
we
up with-
can. See, that's the thing. We can go back.
Our
And
houses are so big.
yes, yeah. But so what I do in everything that I think about is when there's something come up, and people are talking about separation, and that goes how we separate ourselves by merit, how we separate ourselves by so many things so that we can categorize and be better than all that. Every time we do that, and it is absolutely baked into our social systems. Every time that happens, what I do is I try not to play along as much as I possibly can.
It's not easy.
Not to play. So that's something I try and do it's intention every single day of my life. And this has been wonderful. And I'm finding myself that in the discussion groups I'm in and the people I'm interacting with, you know what? People are beginning this is a new story that is really an old story that we're finally getting back to. It's this idea of unity. And I like it because you can approach it from science or you can approach it from spirit. So depending on the person that you're with, you've got an automatic lead in.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be antagonistic. So thank you. This is wonderful.
Well, thank you. I laughed when you mentioned Charles Eisenstein because as luck would have it, in this tiny little school that nobody knows about, we had, I think the most we ever had was 90 students from all across all walks of life. Charles Eisenstein's kids were my students.
Oh, no kidding. Wow. Wow.
And so I know Charles not well, but I do know him, and he's doing some very interesting work.
That's great. And thank you for those comments, Cheryl. There we go. Sorry, trying to. And I want to thank you so much, JD, for that. I know that it's been a powerful tale. I think Penny has a few closing words for us.
Yeah, I thought I'd close with wait, it's tough. I have two poems that speak to what we've been talking about today. The first one is Singularity by Marie Howe. Do you sometimes want to wake up to the singularity we once were? So compact, nobody needed a bed or food or money. Nobody hiding in the school bathroom or home alone, pulling open the drawer where the pills are kept. For every atom belonging to me, as good belongs to you. Remember? There was no nature, no them, no tests to determine if the elephant grieves her calf or if the coral reef feels pain. Trashed oceans don't speak English or Farsi or French. Would that we could wake up to what we were when we were ocean, and before that to when sky was earth and animal was energy and rock was liquid and stars were space and space was not at all nothing. Before we came to believe humans were so important, before this awful loneliness. Can molecules recall it, what once was, before anything happened? No I, no we, no one, no was, no verb, no noun, only a tiny, tiny dot, brimming with is, all, everything, home. And there's one more, just a quick one, On Any Given Day by Rosemary Watola Tromer. How easily I forget I contain the story of the universe. Easier sometimes to feel alone, as if I am not connected to every single atom around me, as if I am separate from the shimmer that made it all, as if I am not also you.
Thank you, Penny. So once more, JD, we so appreciate your time and presence and insights. It's been a huge gift to all of us. And in particular, I'm always struck by the delight and joy in your spirit. And it comes across and is a gift in itself. So thank you for now. And hopefully we'll see many of you again next month.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Great.
And why